Hello, everybody. Oh, goodness me. I feel like there's so much to talk about. Why am I like this? Why can't I just be a normal person who just jumps into a video and just starts recording? You'll notice now. You probably won't even notice, really. I didn't put any product in my hair. And this is kind of what it looks. It's just a little bit fluffier. Just a little bit fluffier, isn't it? Just a little fluffy. Like a baby bird. The thing is, it's not really accurate to say this is what it looks like without product, because usually I think it's more accurate to say it just falls straight down. I have hair that has nothing in the way of natural texture. It's a very fine hair that just goes straight down unless I do something to it, which is one reason why I wore my hair long for quite a while, because with long hair, it at least looked interesting in, just how it looked. Whereas with short hair, I've always had to do something to make it look good, and that's just stressed me out. Anyway, the point is, today we are going to be responding to Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, the video Trans Rights. Now, I suppose actually, inevitably, I'm going to have to do some slight asides here, because I have already done a video on the part 2 of this video. So John Oliver did Trans Rights Part 2. I already responded to that. And this reminded me, I only just remembered, of course, that for a while I was actually thinking, ooh, when I was dedicating my main channel exclusively to streaming, I was making scripted content similar to the content that is now currently on my main channel. I was making that on a different channel because I was aware that there were some people who didn't like the streams because they thought they were long and meandering, which they were, ironically, a little bit like this. As I've said a few times now, I'm finding myself enjoying knowing that on my main channel right now, every video that I upload is a video where I'm like, yeah, this is a good video that will probably have a lot of people wanting to watch it. And I know that there are other videos, for example, the last video I did reacted to Gender Theory for Dudes. If you're new to my Patreon, feel free to go back and check out some of the previous videos I've reacted to. That video, I think if I would have just done that video, uploaded it to my main channel, probably not a lot of people would see it, because they're like, oh, what is this? What's Gender Theory for Dudes? They wouldn't really know what was going on, blah, blah, blah. That's my theory. Anyway, sorry. So that was my tangent, but it's appropriate because now that allows me to segue back to the point that a lot of people, when I was just doing my live reactions, they didn't, they thought, it's a bit whatever. They weren't big fans of it. And I was like, well, okay, but I do have these videos that I put a lot of work into, these videos that I script, and I really think beforehand in a lot of detail about what I'm saying, and then I edit it and all that kind of stuff. So it would be a shame for people to feel that they didn't want to subscribe to my channel because of those videos that they think are a bit too, unfocused, and then miss out on the videos that I think they would probably like. So that's why I did it. But I have those videos, and I unlisted them a while ago because I was like, well, now I need to get rid of the confusion of having two channels, because streaming, it's never going to be something. I might actually do some special Patreon streams, so that could be a fun thing if you're into the whole Patreon thing. But it's never going to be something that I go back to in terms of just doing it all the time, because it was just something that it was fun to do, but my passion for it waned, as people's passions for things do. So that's pretty much all there is to that. But the point is that now I still have those videos, and at some point I can use them. So I might use them. I might even do it for this Wednesday's video, which I guess leads me to another point. This past week has been a bit hectic for me. Fortunately, somebody recommended this video, so I've been able to do the thing that I should do, which is the whole ask people on Patreon for nominations, and then people vote for them, except in this case, people didn't need to vote for them because this was the only video nominated. But I feel like an awful, terrible person because I keep saying, hey guys, remember to nominate videos, blah, blah, blah. But the thing that I'm supposed to be doing is every Thursday, like this is the schedule I'm trying to impose on myself. Every Thursday, I make a Patreon post saying, hey guys, you know, tell me, nominate videos you'd like me to react to every Thursday. Then every Saturday, I say, hey guys, here were the videos that were nominated. Vote on which videos of the videos that were nominated you would like to see me respond to. And then on Monday, I record the video, which is what I'm doing right now. And then on Tuesday, I upload it. Which most of those things, except for the recording of the video, and I also record and edit the video in the same day, except for the recording of the video, none of that should really require too much effort from me. And yet, despite that fact, I just don't do it because, well, that's how it is with me. It's the little things, and this is why I need to have a schedule, because it's the little things that fall under the wayside. Just checking Discord. I actually have to schedule, like, I'll check Discord, because otherwise I have this Discord full of people who, want to talk about stuff, and I just don't look at it because it's a small thing, and I'm busy looking at other big things. And yeah, what happened last month is that I have a media review channel. Last month, I had 2 videos that really blew up on my media review channel. All told, I think in that month, I got over 200,000 views, which was great. It actually allowed me, I had a month, last month, where based on that, in combination, the money I got from the views from that video, in combination with the small amount of money that I get from views on my main channel, that is incredibly small because, spoiler alert, the videos on my main channel are not advertiser friendly, which is then of course where you guys become really helpful because, you give on Patreon, that's really appreciated. But all of that combined, I was actually making a modest, but what you could charitably consider to be a living wage off YouTube for a month. And that was awesome. I was like, wow, that's great, because I love making videos. It's really fun to do. But then I made another video for that channel. I'd had 2 videos in a row, each one. So one got over 100,000 views. The other one got just shy of 100,000 views, which is why I say in total it was just over 200,000. But then I uploaded another video and it's done comparatively far less well. At this point, it's been up for 3 days and it's only around the 1,000 mark. So it needs to be doing like 100 times better in order to be comparable to how I've been doing before. So that was a little bit depressing. It just disheartened me when I was like, yes, I've got video did really well, and then I have a video and just doesn't get any traction at all. But that's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, you're shot down in May, but I know I'm going to change that tune when I'm back on top in June. So all of that's to say that kind of threw me off just mentally. I was like, But again, I don't know. I need to get a hold of these. I need to not let these things bat me back and forth so readily. Where it's just like a slight change to my mental state and everything just falls apart. I'm working on it. It's going okay. I don't know though. Let's say you never can. Whatever. All right, we're actually going to jump into the video. I kind of knew this was going to happen. I was like, oh, I've got some things to say, but I'll start jumping into the video. And I was like, I bet as I'm jumping into the video, I'll suddenly find a way of making it so that I talk about all this stuff anyway. And hey presto, there I did it. Now let's jump in. I don't think it will take us that long to respond to this, so I think this is okay. This will end up being just a reasonably lengthed video, so let's go.
But it's also been a big year for the tea part of that equation, from Caitlyn Jenner's Vanity Fair cover to TV shows like Transparent to another small milestone.
It's quite funny to have Caitlyn Jenner be like the first thing mentioned as, wow, this is big, considering, Jenner's a Republican and generally seems to be not very good optically for the trans movement, giving off very strong AGP vibes, and also, yeah, like I say, being someone who is actually quite conservative and doesn't really gel with the generally progressive charade that the trans identity movement tries to put off.
Actress Laverne Cox marked another milestone with the drop of a curtain at Madame Tussauds San Francisco.
Now that is a big step forward for transgender Americans, and it's frankly about time.
Wax women are women.
Because bear in mind, it came after the same milestone for Spider Americans and Wookiees. But for all the strides...
Okay, look, I know I shouldn't, like, deconstruct the joke or anything. Like, I get it, it is a joke. But at the same time, because, like, the joke there is, oh, isn't that weird? Because, you know, you would think that trans people, being a significant part of the population, would get more representation. And yet, Spider, like, these fictional characters have been represented. But the point is, those characters are unique and different, which is why people pay attention to them. You know, like, I know it's like such an obvious point to make, but yeah, I would expect fictional, interesting characters who are iconic to maybe get represented in something that's basically supposed to represent iconic people before any individual of a specific group, if that group is relatively small.
Don't you feel funny with the wrong genitalia? Not as a joke, you stand up in the women's bathroom.
You've got breast.
Well, I guess it's one of those things where, like, in general, a lot of talk show stuff, it's got to be quite direct. Have you ever seen that video? Have you ever seen that video where I'm going to get it up? It doesn't really matter. Like, I don't want to make fun of these people, and I'm not really laughing at them, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Living with a micro penis.
That they are concerned about the size of their manhood.
Meaning concerned as in small?
Worrying that it's too small. Yeah, and we're joined today by three of the country's bravest men, actually, because there aren't many that would come and sit on the sofa. I know you're all a bit nervous. Please don't be. We're going to be as sensitive as we can.
I just like the way it says, we're going to be as sensitive as we can. And then the banner just comes up, living with a micro penis. Like, a lot of daytime talk shows and things like that, they're kind of going to scrape the bottom of the barrel or not necessarily be the most dignified environment. So it's not that surprising that if you've got someone on who the reason, and again, I don't know whether or not in these cases, I can't say in all these cases, the reason why they've been brought on is that they are a trans. But assuming that's the case, and sometimes it is likely to be the case, you're going to think, well, a big part of that is your relationship to the signifiers of your biological sex. So it's not that surprising people are going to mention the signifiers of your biological sex.
You would look like a woman to me, totally. Yes?
What are you doing? It is not...
Okay, the thing is, you can't blame people for wondering about this, right? Because most people rightly think, hold on a minute, a woman's not supposed to have a penis. So if a biological male says, I'm a woman, it is very, very reasonable for one of your first questions to be, like, it's so intensely reasonable for one of your first questions to be, well, do you have a penis? Like, obviously. It just because that is an obvious signifier of being a biological male, and for most people the idea of a biological male being a woman doesn't make much sense. The idea of a woman having a penis doesn't make much sense. So obviously that's going to be something people are wondering about. Am I going to say it's completely, respectful or whatever for that to be something you ask someone? Well, yeah, I guess not. Having said that, like I say, I feel like for me with... Like, I think about, like, shows like Jerry Springer, and in the UK we have an equivalent called Jeremy Kyle. Like, aren't those shows just like trash? Where you look at people whose lives are terrible and you find out unnecessarily invasive details about their life. Like, a lot of TV is unnecessarily invasive, so I kind of wonder whether or not it makes much sense culturally to be like, oh, you're asking someone about whether or not they have a penis. What a shock. Like, isn't that on par with a lot of what's going on TV? Oh, okay, actually, I want to say this recently. This is just like a complete side note. Like, pretty much, it's just related, I guess, to the general state of TV. But my wife, she was watching a reality TV show on Netflix called Love is Blind. The one thing that was interesting about it is there was one couple who succeeded. So the basic premise of the show is that they are in pods or whatever, and they can't see each other. So they can basically only talk to each other. Like, that makes sense. So pretty much they're just having Skype calls with each other, seeing whether they connect personally. Initially, they can't see each other, so they can't see each other, and they have to decide, in order to progress through the show, they have to decide to pursue a relationship with somebody based on not being able to see them, so based on personality. And then they decide whether or not they like this person, and then they, make the ultimate decision, are they going to stick with them? The only person, there was only one couple who, there were, I think, 4 or maybe 5, I think some of them failed really early on, but 4 or 5 couples that progressed from the blind stage to actually seeing each other. And of those, I think it must have been 5 couples, only one actually said, yeah, we're going to continue to pursue this. Here's the big takeaway. The one couple, as a man, as a heterosexual man, I can say that the distinct thing about the one couple that actually made progress is that the woman was notably attractive, was markedly attractive physically, whereas for all the other couples, I'm not going to do the whole 2 out of 10 thing, I'm not some connoisseur or anything, but they simply just were not as attractive. So I found it really funny that this show's called Love is Blind, and then it progresses through the stage where they've seen each other, and let's see how the relationship plays out, and all the relationships start failing, at different points, failing, and the only couple that makes it to the end is the one where the woman's attractive. I say woman, it's hard for me to judge with the men. I couldn't say whether or not the men were attractive. If you've seen that show, let me know if you think how you would rate the men. But I just found that really funny that it was, and I guess the only relevance there is it's about trash TV and how trash TV is. And I find it really funny when trash TV tries to not be trash. Another example, and I'm not going to do a whole thing about this, but there was another show called Too Hot to Handle, which is also a Netflix thing. And it's basically that a load of you have to be on an island and you can't do any kind of sex stuff. But the thing is, again, the premise is supposed to be, it forces them to form an emotional connection. And it so obviously, intensely does not to do that. Because the fact that there's this prohibition on any kind of physical intimacy means that most of the time, all anybody is talking about is physical intimacy. That's it. They're just being man, I can't wait until I wish I could have sex with this person, but I can't, blah blah blah. So I don't know, I like it when reality TV tries to be at least a little bit more noble in terms of what it's trying to be about, and even then it fails. But the overall point there is that reality TV is trashy, TV in general is trashy, a lot of pop culture is trashy. So again, is it that shocking that people are saying, hey, tell me about your genitals? It's not that shocking.
No more okay to ask transgender people about their sex organs than it would be to ask Jimmy Carter whether or not he's circumcised. Which, by the way, he is. Smooth like a boiled carrot.
Are foreskins particularly rough? That's not what doesn't make much sense to me.
She used to be a guy,
But now it's a woman.
This is
So weird.
Are you just saying a woman? I can't even keep up.
That's kind of accidentally woke, isn't it? He's saying, obviously I don't approve of people being woke, but usually I angle this so it's got more of my books in the background, as you realized. But yeah, what he's saying there is, hey, transgender woman, surely that's just a woman. Woke. What an ally. What a hero. Wow.
Anymore.
Holy shit! I really hope that's also how he reports the weather.
Well, I feel like the real thing there is, holy shit, he can't keep up with the concept of transgender woman. Wait until he finds out about non-binary and gender fluid and those people who basically look like women, but they'll be how I look with he, him in my profile and whatever else. The people who intentionally See, again, I'm going to say make a mockery of trans identity, and obviously I think trans identity is a silly concept to begin with, but I will say there's different kinds of silly. I've always been of the opinion that trans identity as a legal fiction to describe biological males or biological females, but I'll stick with biological just to keep it simple, biological males who get surgery to look a way that is more kind of how you would expect a biological female to look, and they conform to certain stereotypes and expectations of femininity, to say that that person is a woman as a something that you acknowledge is a fiction, that you're basically just saying, well, because they kind of perform that role, I think that is regressive. I don't agree with it morally, but I think it makes sense, or at least there is a logic to it. And that is markedly different from a lot of contemporary trans identity, where it's just purely about self-identity and even about inventing completely new categories. And that doesn't even make sense. And that is a big difference. So, with that said, this guy who's struggling with the idea of transgender woman, could you imagine if he finds out, like, I want to meet this weatherman and tell him all about non-binary and all that, because he would lose his mind.
Wait, it used to be rainy and now it's sunny? So now it's just sunny? Now I can't even keep up anymore! I can't... This doesn't make my head work! Look.
There's actually a whole video I wanted to do about this. It's like this joke about, you used to be, so you used to be a baby and then you just matured and became an adult. Nice try, giant baby, which is one of those things which I have always given credit where it's due. And I think that is a funny joke. But in terms of being a logical argument, there are obviously issues with it. The biggest issue being that there is, when you talk about especially biology, and you talk about your genotype, there are ways that things are expected. Like, the entire concept of how we can have medicine is that there are ways that things are expected to develop, and it is significant if things do not develop in that way. As such, you expect a boy, a biological male, to go from being a boy to then hit puberty and become a man. You don't expect, and thus it is more of note, and thus it is more worth talking about, if a biological male takes hormones like estrogen and does all sorts of other stuff to make themselves appear to be a woman and claims themselves to be such. And of course, with weather, yes, it is completely normal and expected for weather to change. Indeed, if weather stayed the same, that would be, again, the unique situation would therefore be worthy of note. Obviously, you can have unique situations, but if you're going to take a unique situation and claim, I'm a woman, even though actually your claim to being a woman is a very unique situation because you're saying you're a woman, but you're a biological male, you need to be able to offer a justification for why you're making that claim.
Let's take that minute to fill in that bamboozled weatherman and everyone else on some basic details.
Okay, this is useful. I want to hear the explanation.
Transgender people have a gender identity that differs from the one they were assigned at birth. And that gender identity is not...
See, that seems a bit weird, because isn't an identity an internal... Like, don't they usually define identity as an internal sense of self? So how can you have a gender identity at birth? Because I would say, I guess, that your identity could be something that is assigned to you, because I think that a lot of the time your identity is a description about reality. So... again, I don't really know if that makes sense in terms of what the word identity means, but maybe I could say, if you are a biological female, your identity is as a woman, regardless of what you think, because that's what I'm saying. However, as trans activists define identity, they certainly don't think that. They think your identity is your sense of yourself. So how could you possibly have an identity assigned at birth?
Not the same as sexual orientation. Gender identity is who you are. Sexual orientation is who you love. Some transgender people...
Oh, yeah, they're different, are they? Well, don't let the people who, think that you can't have LGB, the LGB phobes, hear about that. Yeah, obviously, you don't need to tell that many people. I mean, obviously there are conservatives who don't know the difference, but you don't need to tell certainly somebody like me that LGB and T are very different, that sexual orientation and gender identity are different things. What you need to do is tell anyone who thinks that people, same-sex attracted individuals who want to focus on same-sex attraction and not trans identity because it's a very different thing, the people who think that those people are bigots, you need to tell them that gender identity and sexual orientation are different things.
What do I call a transgender person? It's so confusing. Well, actually, it's pretty simple. Call them whatever they want to be called. You can do it.
Okay, so there's the confusion. My question would be why? And why are you suggesting that when I don't think anyone would possibly be consistent with that on other points? If I said, call me black because I want to be black, you would not agree with that. And even if you did agree with that, if I said, say that 2 + 2 = 5, you would not agree with that. There is clearly a point at which somebody would say, no, reality is reality, and saying, well, you should just call someone what they want to be called when, what you would be calling them is basically what you would be saying is true about them, that's going to bother a lot of people.
David Evans woke up one day and said, everyone call me the Edge. And we all went, find the Edge? Are we talking the noun or the verb? And that's...
Yeah, there's a difference between names. Like, names are the exception, but it makes sense for names to be the exception. Because the thing about names is that they're not supposed to be descriptive. There's actually a quite funny story. My mum was resistant to calling my sister Isabel, because Isabel means beautiful. Because what if she ended up being really ugly? Or she was basically saying you can't call a daughter Isabel or something that suggests they're beautiful, because if they're not, that could you don't want to have somebody who's got an ironic name. My name, on the other hand, is as we all know, Michael means, I think it's like who is like God. I think it's supposed to be a question, but where's the question mark? Michael? But yeah, who is like God is apparently what my name means. The thing about that is that, I don't know, how would you even... I mean, we're all made in the image of God, so I guess you can't go wrong with that name. But the point is, obviously people don't take names like that. Most people don't. Most people wouldn't be like, hey, your name is a lie. And with that said, generally speaking, we just say, no, the name is literally just a noise you make to identify who somebody is. That's true. But most other words aren't like that, and thank God most other words aren't like that, because then no word would have any meaning, right? We don't expect the word Michael. Again, you can find out what your name means, so you're like, oh, that's nice, but that's like a trivia piece of information, right? Whereas nobody actually cares about what your name means in terms of deciding whether or not they're going to agree to call you that name. But if we applied that consistently and said, oh yeah, just in general, we're not going to care what words mean when it comes to whether we're going to call someone that name, yeah, that's going to be pretty unworkable, because then that if you don't care what words mean anymore, you now officially don't have any words.
It's not just that. It's not just that.
Oh,
Over the past...
Just while I'm at it, the people who are like, oh, J.K. Rowling went by a male pen name. Yeah, that's fine. She didn't claim to literally be a man. It's that simple. No one has said, no, literally, Alice Cooper, that's fine. Yeah, Alice isn't really a man's name, but he never claimed to be, as far as I know, he's never claimed to be a woman. So what could I possibly disagree with there, right? If he says my name's Alice Cooper, I can't say, no, it isn't. Because that's not how names work. Names are something that people can basically decide for themselves. And some people maybe have pretty weird names and they would want to decide for themselves. So, yeah, especially stage names, pen names, things like that would be even more ridiculous to have an issue with it. So it's just not a comparison at all.
That is terrible. Those statistics are so depressing, it's enough to make you angry at the very concept of numbers. F*** you, symbols meant to represent a specific value!
Classic John Oliver funny. So there was just some statistics there about, like, trans people going through bad things, and yeah, I don't doubt that they are. I think most of that is not best understood as being because people object to the concept of trans identity. I think, excuse me, I think rather what we're probably dealing with here is an aversion to gender nonconformity, or maybe even homosexuality, because a lot of trans-identified people are gender nonconforming, and a lot of trans-identified individuals are homosexual or in some way, essentially with trans identity. While I don't think obviously it does have anything really to do with sexual orientation, it does complicate sexual orientation by dint of being about, you know, what's the one I'm looking for, quibbling the definitions of the terms man and woman. So yeah, there's likely to be some homophobia involved there. Yeah, that's basically it. I think that it's a terrible thing that's happening, and obviously I'm against it, but I don't think for the most part it's actually people being like, that person identifies in a way I disagree with, so I'm going to attack them, because that's kind of where I'm coming from, and it obviously doesn't express itself in any sort of a violent way.
They're saying that I need to fulfill a certain look that they are designating means male, and that I'm, you know,
I will say, like, the thing about, you know, taking people's identification when it comes to photos is I feel like essentially the main question should be, do they look how they would typically look? My last passport photo was taken just before I started growing my hair out, so I spent a good while, 10 years basically, with long hair, and a passport photo that was not me with long hair at all. And as you know, I recently cut my hair, and I also recently realized my passport needs renewing, but I realized that before I cut my hair. So now my new passport photo is me with long hair, and I've decided to cut my hair. So isn't that great? When I was in Canada, they basically refused to believe that it was me, because I'd also been, like, I hadn't shaved at all when I was in Canada. I was in Canada for like 2 months during the summer, which led to my kind of hiatus from YouTube.
They ask you your weight. They don't weigh you like a prize hog. Plus, the whole idea of a driver's license...
Well, that does create an interesting question, though. Like, what if you just obviously lied about your weight? Like, what would they do about that? I said, I am 10,000 pounds. Okay.
Photo is to present how you look from day to day. That's why DMV employees tell you not to...
That's what I said. That's quite funny, actually. He's going to say, that's why DMV employees tell you not to smile, and everyone's going to laugh.
Smile.
What I like about this deployment is I can be my authentic self. I'm just another guy. Whereas back home, I'm still seen as female, and I go by female regs and standards. Here in Afghanistan, a war zone...
At least the Taliban know what a woman is, eh?
It's like a vacation to me because I can be myself in such an austere environment.
I actually literally watched Fahrenheit 9/11 today, and it made me angry about, you know, the whole Iraq war thing, and the Afghan war. So, you know, it bothers me hearing someone say, oh yeah, I actually liked it in Afghanistan. It was fun. Oh good, I'm glad it was fun for you.
That Afghanistan is a place where you can be yourself. That is the least likely tourism slogan for Afghanistan. But I'd put it right behind water park capital of the world and birthplace of the twerk. But
sometimes he's funny. That makes me laugh. I like that. Funny old John Oliver being a funny guy.
It's a new Show Me Your Papers bill for Arizona. The sex on your birth certificate would have to match the sex of the bathroom or locker room that you use.
I do find the whole, like, trans toilets thing, it's a very tiring situation, because it's very easy for someone to be intentionally disingenuous. What I've always said is I don't think it can be perfectly enforced, and it can't be perfectly enforced. I will disagree with you if you say it can be perfectly enforced. It can't. Because again, and this is what I always say, even if you think even if you know you could 100% of the time tell someone's biological sex, do you think everyone 100% of the time could tell someone's biological sex all the time with confidence and never get it wrong? If you think that, I mean, I don't think I can tell 100% of the time. I think I could tell with confidence. So that's kind of my take on it. But what I've always said is that actually, in reality and practice, you can tell most of the time, and I think that's the best system. And if we did want a perfect system, I do think a perfect system would have to be individual cubicles for everyone and no communal place in the bathroom or changing rooms, because that's the only thing that works. But yeah, whatever. It is what it is.
The target.
Now, I wish someone had told me when I was in high school that I could have felt like a woman when it came time to take showers in PE. I'm pretty sure I would have found my feminine side and said, Coach, I think I'd rather shower with the girls today.
Okay, so that was like, that's an unfortunate thing to say. Although I will say, like, a lot of people do this, where they say, like, oh, the fact that there's kind of like two things there. So I guess I'll address both of them. One, yes, it is completely legit. And of course, I guarantee John Oliver is going to avoid the first point. But yes, there are things saying basically, because that's the problem, right? There is no perfect solution to the trans bathroom issue. Because I've already said, I don't think you can perfectly enforce sex segregation. But you certainly shouldn't, I mean, I guess you don't need to enforce anything like this, but you shouldn't have a system whereas anyone can just go into any bathroom you want. And trans activists, when I said people are disingenuous, they're disingenuous in saying, well, the only solution is everyone just uses whatever bathroom they want. And of course, that's when you get, sorry, I'm being American by using the phrase bathroom. That's where you get the things like, do you think someone's in the wrong changing room or whatever? Don't say anything about it. Don't express any disagreement, blah, blah, blah. And that's obviously not okay. No, like people, if I walked into a woman's bathroom, everyone would have a right to say, hey, get out of here. That's nonsense. You know, you're gross. Go away. What's that clip from? I'm going to find it. I always like to think about moments in comedies and other kind of things where you get kind of implicitly transphobic moments where everyone like no one has a problem with them, because of course deep down everyone recognizes that reality is implicitly transphobic. Let me show you the example. It's kind of funny.
I once took my trunks off in the communal area of a ladies' changing room after getting out of a pool and misreading the signs through my foggy goggles.
Okay, so there we go. That's the context. This is a panel show. We have them in the UK. I've always thought for this, like, I wish Americans just had a hand at have a hand? Is that like the expression? You have a hand at something when you like give something a go? I'm not sure if it is. I feel like I use a lot of made up non-expressions, to be honest. But yeah, I feel like Americans should give panel shows a go. Not in terms of watching them. I know a lot of Americans do, but making them. I want to see, and I am actually not as disdainful of American culture as a lot of British people are. I know a lot of British people are like, America. Whereas I'm not. I think America does, they got their own thing going on. And I think in some ways the thing they got going on is even better than what we got going on in the UK. So I'd like to see how they'd handle the panel show format. But as you can see, he just said, he walked into women's changing area. He says area because he's from the northwest of England, and they say instead of air. So instead of where, they say were. Where are you going? Anyway, so I'll skip to the bit that's relevant. So here we are, roughly.
The goggles aren't yet steamed up.
The goggles are on. They're feeling a bit wet, and I walked in. I'm in there, and then
he's in the, like I say, northwest.
I think right, and then I look up with my goggles. It's goggles up, trunks down.
Excuse me.
So, he acts out very funny.
You're that woman from the One Show.
This is the ladies. Get out, you pervert.
See, and there it is. Transphobia. This is the ladies. Get out, you pervert. So, that's that. The videos, you should watch the whole clip. Lee Mack and his foggy goggles. Go watch Lee Mack and his foggy goggles. Go on to leemackandhisfoggygoggles.com. There's like a whole website for it. Anyway, so there we go. But that's it, right? You can, I'm guaranteeing, or I'm telling you this right now, if someone who looks like Lee Mack walks into the women's changing rooms, takes his goggles off, pulls his trunks down and moons you, you're allowed to say, "This is the late." Right there, I'm from Wales. "This is the ladies, you pervert." Is that good? Did I nail it? Did I sound just like her? Let's check.
This is the ladies. Get out, you pervert.
I missed off get out. Get out, you pervert. I'm great at accents anyway. So that's just a little fun exploration of the whole thing of, obviously, biological males kind of walk into women's changing rooms, and if you've got your daughter with you or whatever else, you've just got to say, all right, that's fine. No, I can't say anything. Obviously, that's nonsense. Now, as for him saying, hey, you know, if I were at school, and I found out I could use the women's bathrooms or shower with the girls just because I said I was a girl, I'd be doing that like nobody's business, you know, like he said in that accent of his. I think a lot of people are being very disingenuous. To be honest, like, I'll say this right now. I'll say this now on my Patreon off the record. I think there was a recent situation you may have noticed or been made aware of with Vorsh. Vorsh and some accusations of possession of inappropriate material as it relates to children. Now, people are making various criticisms, and I think some of them were good, whatever. But there was one thing people were saying, which was so Vorsh said, "I think we as a society sexualize young teenagers basically below the age of consent." There's a red kite outside my window. It's really, it's going to fly away. There's no way I'm going to be able to get it, but it's beautiful. Anyway, yeah, it's off. I love red kites. He says, we sexualize young teenagers basically at an age where it's really not appropriate for us to be doing so. And there were some people who were like, oh, the fact he's saying that means he does it. And it's actually him admitting he does it. I'm like, that's a very disingenuous thing to say. Like, there are other reasons to think that Vorsh is sus. But no, let me go on the record right now and say that I also agree that we sexualize. Look, we all know about Dan Schneider and like Nickelodeon. Yeah, we do sexualize, not everyone, but too many people sexualize children, young teenagers, whatever, people below the age of consent in a way that's entirely inappropriate. I really hope we're all clear on the fact that me saying that is not me admitting like, oh, what I mean is I do it. And it's kind of similar here, right? Where, so yeah, again, there we go. I just defended Vorsh. But no, yeah, I mean, look, there are many good criticisms you can make against Vorsh. But him saying, oh, we, have an inappropriately sexual depiction or kind of like whatever of children in society, him saying that, it's really disingenuous to take that as him admitting that he does it. There are other reasons to think he does it. Anyway, likewise, somebody saying in general that men will take advantage of the situation is not them admitting they would. But also, now of course you might say, well, that's not germane because this guy has said he would. Well, first of all, he's pretty obviously joking, right? No one would actually admit that. No one would actually be like, hey, if I thought I could get away with perving on women, I would do it. But it's kind of like something that people will say. There's some things you shouldn't do, but people will say they would do them. And this is an example of that. Like that's my take on it. But even if he was saying he'd do it, okay, one, it's not necessarily if someone's admitting that they don't think there should be a bad law, or sorry, they don't think there should be a law that is in place because that law is bad, but they're saying, given that law is in place, they are going to act on it. That's not necessarily that ridiculous of a thing to say. For example, I personally, if I had the ability to, and it was worth it for me, I would hire an accountant to take advantage of all the various tax loopholes that I could take advantage of legally. I wouldn't want to go to prison, so I wouldn't want to break the law, but I don't want to be the one sucker. Like, let's say, and I don't know how this would possibly work out, but let's say somehow I'm making huge amounts of money. I don't want to be the one sucker who's paying all my taxes. No, I'm going to find an accountant who's going to save me a whole load of bank by finding all the loopholes. But at the same time, I also think we should get rid of those loopholes. And I don't think there's an inconsistency there. I'm saying the loopholes are bad, we should get rid of them, but I'm not going to be the one sucker who's being a little goody two-shoes and not taking advantage of them. And I think that's a reasonable position to hold to. And I think there are other kind of similar examples to that, where you can say, hey, you know, if I had the opportunity to exploit this loophole, yeah, I'd do it, but I think we should get rid of it. Now, you might say, well, okay, that's fine. Everyone likes money. Not everyone likes perving on, you know, girls or women. And that's true. But as far as I'm concerned, what matters is, does the person think that the loophole should be there, right? If someone tells me, hey, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of this loophole, or I would like to, because he's not even saying he would, he's saying, I want to take advantage of this loophole that would let me perv on women, but I'm 100% against the loophole. In a way, the fact they're against the loophole is kind of the more important thing, because here's the flip side. Someone who says, well, I'm not going to take advantage of the loophole, but I think the loophole should still exist. Well, they're actually allowing, like, they're the ones who actually want to allow people to do it, right? If there's like a spectrum, you got over on this side people who want the loophole to exist and fully intend to take advantage of it, and on this side you have people who don't want the loophole to exist and wouldn't ever take advantage of it. In my opinion, then you got in the middle, kind of the two positions, like the middle positions of either I want the loophole to exist, but I don't want to take advantage of it, or I don't want the loophole to exist, but given that it does exist, I want to take advantage of it. And the question is, which of these two positions is worse? And I'm kind of saying, well, if someone wants the loophole to exist, that's worse, because they're actually saying this thing that allows, you know, all this inappropriate conduct from people should be there. Whereas the person who's saying, well, I'm going to take advantage of it, but I don't want it to exist, if this person gets what they want, that's better for everyone, because the loophole goes away. If this person gets what they want, that doesn't really help anyone, right? Like, it doesn't really matter whether this person's spying on women in the women's showers. What matters is, can somebody spy on women in the women's showers? And this person thinks they should be allowed to. So there we go. I'm saying that Mike Huckabee, even if he is saying, hey, you know, I'm not going to lie, I want to identify as a woman and go perv on some women in the women's showers. Okay, maybe he's saying that, but you know what? He's the one who wants to get rid of that loophole. So if he got his way, no one would be allowed to spy in the women's showers. John Oliver, he's saying, oh, I'm not going to identify as a woman and go spy on the women in the showers. I hope he's saying that. But he's saying that loophole should exist. He's saying people should be allowed to do that. That's worse. So yeah.
But there is something inherently wrong with forcing us to listen to your fucked up daydreams about all the sex crimes you would have committed as a teenager had you just been able to find a legal loophole.
John, you think the loophole should exist, so how can you complain about that? Yeah, the thing is, like, what does this even mean, right? Because you're saying it's a sex crime for somebody to identify as a woman and enter a women's changing room. It's a sex crime if they don't really mean it. Which at that point, you're taking this very nebulous concept of trans identity that nobody can really explain particularly coherently. And you're saying that it is in fact so concrete that the difference between an authentic trans identity and an inauthentic trans identity is enough to be the determiner of the criminality of an action. And to me, that is absurd. People will say, oh, you know, you think that that you know, we should define women with reference to biological sex, but somebody's hormones and chromosomes, they don't necessarily affect their everyday life. But meanwhile, you're saying that it should literally be considered a crime if you do something and your gender identity is not authentic and you're just doing it to perv on people. Well, you can't enforce that. So that's just such an obviously bizarre thing to say.
It even turned up in a campaign ad when Gainesville, Florida was trying to pass one of these bills.
It seems like it's going to be really funny. I identify as a woman. See, this is extra terrifying because he's a Floridian man as well, and that's never good.
There are many places that Michael would fit in. A tattoo parlour in Reno, playing steel guitar in a Johnny Cash tribute band, or on the label of his own barbecue sauce. But a women's bathroom? Yeah, not so much. Besides, it is so much easier for everyone when people are allowed to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity rather than one that might match the...
Okay, here's the thing. You just gave an example of somebody who, through hormones and maybe surgery, has made themselves look more typically like a biological male. What does that have to do with gender identity? There is nothing... Here's a question. What if actually that individual there was a detransitioned and went by female pronouns? What if that was one of those people who post the hilarious, you know, how I look with he, him in my bio, except I guess the opposite, how I look with she, her in my bio? If basically, I've said this before, both sides, the gender identity side and the biological sex side, think that there should be situations, or there could be situations, where individuals who actually look basically out of place in a female or male bathroom should be allowed to use the bathroom in which they would look out of place. The difference is that at least in the biological sex system, or whatever you want to call it, the biological female who maybe looks like a biological male isn't actually a biological male. Whereas in the gender identity system, they look like a biological male and they are a biological male. So tell me which one makes more sense.
I was being forced to use the girls' bathroom at my school until very recently. Because the school administration did not support my gender identity by letting me use the restrooms concordant with my gender identity, the kids at my school bullied me. The kids...
Okay, here's a question. Think this through, okay? You're being bullied because you're looking like that and you're in a women's bathroom. What about the many, many women who are tomboys or who are lesbian or for whatever reason, because that is not that far from how many... Well, I was going to say it's not how far from a woman, how far from how a woman could look. I mean, obviously not. But there are many women who, even having nothing to do with trans identity, not even thinking about trans identity, could decide to look like that. There are women who just have short hair because they feel like having short hair. And it doesn't even occur to them to think of that in terms of gender identity or anything like that. Or at least, you know, back in the day it wouldn't have. Maybe nowadays they can't avoid that being something that they have to think about. But here's the issue, okay? This trans identity thing, it doesn't solve the problem for those girls. In fact, what you've created there, if you say, hey, don't worry, we've solved the problem. Now, if you get bullied for looking like that in a women's bathroom, you can just go to the male bathroom because you identify as a man. So what are you saying to the lesbians and the tomboys? And, you know, whoever else, you know, other women who basically look like that. I mean, you don't even have to be a lesbian or a tomboy necessarily to have that kind of hairstyle. You're saying, hey, the only way out of this is for you to identify as trans. That's the issue with phrasing a lot of this stuff as a trans identity issue. You're making it so some of the people who are affected by this stuff that are not trans identified are put in a situation where the only way for them to actually receive any help is to identify as trans, and that's a serious problem.
That's what they do. Sit on your own, Becca. Side ponytails are so 5 nevers ago.
Still more convincing than most trans... No.
And if you are not willing to support transgender people for their sake, at least do it for your own. Because we've been through this before. We know how this thing ends.
Oh, so this is the whole, like, wrong side of history thing. The wrong side of history is a really interesting topic. Honestly, I don't know how, like, long this is going to be when I've edited it down, but I think we've probably reached the point where I can end the video now. But at some point, I want to make a whole video on that wrong side of history thing. And, like, you know, it's a legitimate thing to wonder. Because it is true that there are a lot of the people against the whole trans identity thing are conservatives. Generally, the conservative position tends to lose out in the end. you know, it's worth wrestling with, but I think it would take too long to wrestle with in this video, so I'll kind of just let him finish the point without really saying anything about it.
There's not a stamp featuring George Wallace at the schoolhouse door. And you are not going to get a monument that says at the base of it...
Yeah, like George Wallace, like that's what I was thinking about. This is what... Because I was thinking about George Wallace, and it's crazy that he said, like, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, or whatever he said. And it's like... It's so insane that he was so confidently wrong. Like, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation... And then, like, segregation ended, like, just a few years, like, after he said that. But it's insane that people were like that. People were like, yeah, we're just going to have... Like, and you almost have to wonder on something like, did they even care about the fact... Like, surely they must have known on some level. Like, surely on some level, they must have known. No, people aren't going to be like... Like, they must have seen the writing was on the wall. Like, it used to be that America was super duper duper racist. I'm not going to, I'm not going to end the question of, like, how... To what extent it's not racist anymore, but whatever. It used to be super duper racist, and it became generally less racist over the 20th century, again, with kind of ups and downs. You would think that in the 1960s, someone would be like, I really don't know if this segregation thing's going to last. I don't know how long black people and white people just shouldn't be allowed to be around each other is really going to work out. But no, they were just like, yeah, this is happening. We're just keeping it. And I don't know, did they even care? But then, like I say, thinking about that got me thinking, well, I know there are people who would literally think that about me, who would see me being like, well, trans identity doesn't... See, the thing is, again, I'm not all weird about it, though. I'm not like I'm not all angry and passionate about it. I'm just saying, well, I don't see a reason to think that a biological male can be a woman. So, it doesn't really make much sense, but they might say, maybe about the people who are more passionate about it, like, well, lots of other people are more passionate about it in a way that maybe would seem more evocative of somebody passionately defending segregation. And I might say, well, that's someone who's so passionate about this anti-trans thing. Surely they know that ultimately them being remembered unfavorably as a backwards bigot is just around the corner. And I don't think, of course, that is accurate. But yeah, that is what got me thinking about it. So I guess I'm going to end the video now. Not really too much to say. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you tomorrow. And the video I upload tomorrow will probably be a reworking of my response to part 2 of this video. So you can check that out. I hope you enjoy it. Bye. I realise, of course, that the fact that I've said this is usually where I do stuff that I wouldn't do on my main channel, and yet this is functioning going to be very similar to what I would do on my main channel, is a bit strange. But in this case, I think it makes sense. Whatever. There we go. That's it. That's all I'm going to say on it.